I'm going to tell you about the afternoon I sat down for a simple cup of coffee and walked away with my heart rearranged. A neighbor I barely knew chose a table beside mine and said a sentence so plain and honest that it moved through me like warm light through cold glass. You think you know your day, your routine, your place in the world, until someone notices you so carefully that your old map no longer fits. That's what happened to me at the cafe. And yes, you won't believe how something so ordinary turned into the most unexpected, deeply felt moment I've had in years. Before I begin, tell me where you're watching from. I love picturing you as I speak. What city are you in? What corner cafe or kitchen table are you sitting at right now? Type your city in the comments so I can imagine the skyline, the street names, the weather rolling past your window while we share this story. It was a Tuesday shaped like every other Tuesday. I'd chosen the corner table under the old tin ceiling, where the afternoon light leaks in across the bricks and the chalkboard menu, and that little bowl of sugar packets nobody ever refills quite enough. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and orange peels, with the darker thread of espresso pulling through and the soft hiss of milk steaming. I've made a ritual of it. This hour after the lunch crowd, before the laptop chorus arrives. My name is Emily, 48, and routines are the railings I hold onto when the stairs feel too steep. Mark came in with the draft the door always drags, bringing a scatter of jasmine from the flower shop 2 doors down. I'd known him as the guy from 3 houses over, the one who rolls his garbage bin out the night before collection and waves without making a show of it. We traded a weather sentence or two by the mailboxes. He has that quiet steadiness you notice in good porch railings and well-kept tools, a careful man, a respectful one. Today he wore a soft blue work shirt, and the sleeves were pushed up, forearms marked with what looked like paint or sawdust. He spotted me, not in the way of a man hunting for a seat, but as someone who had come in for something else, and just found it. "Is this taken?" he asked, standing at the edge of my sunlight. I shook my head and moved my notebook, suddenly aware of my own small handwriting, my habit of underlining the same word twice when it matters. He set his coffee down, and the table wobbled like always, so he slid a napkin under the leg without comment. That small piece of noticing, of solving something quiet, eased me. "I'm Mark," he said, as if we hadn't spent 3 years doing the nod of polite strangers. "Emily," I said, because saying it felt like opening a door and checking the weather again. The barista Jay called someone's name like an echo, and the hiss of the machine filled our pause. I might have drifted back to my notebook, to the little grocery list I always pretend is a poem in progress. But he looked at me with a steadiness that wasn't heavy, only careful, and it kept me in my chair differently than before. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," he said. His voice had that Sunday radio warmth, a bit of gravel at the edges. "It's small, but it's not nothing." A sentence like that can make your heart do a little check of its locks. Are we safe? Are we ready? I set my pen down and folded my hands, imagining I looked composed. Inside, I was as alert as a bird. "Last winter," he began, "I saw you in the building lobby with Mrs. Diaz. She lives around the corner from both of us. It was that week when the ice stuck and every curve was a decision. You weren't doing anything grand. You were just taking the bags from her and walking so slowly next to her, matching her pace like it was music only you could hear. I remembered that day. The cold that finds your ribcage, the pearly skim of ice that made every step a prayer. The way Mrs. Diaz's coat was too thin, how her hands shook. I remember I talked about the tomatoes like they were jewels to distract her from the curb. I didn't think anyone saw." Mark took a breath that seemed to square off a worry in him. "My daughter and I. We weren't speaking then," he said. "Pride is a foolish fuel. That day I was carrying a box to my truck. I saw you reach for those grocery bags and the care in it. It knocked something loose in me. I don't know why. I put my box down, called my girl, and said what I should have said 2 months sooner. The café shrank, not smaller, but more exact. The pipes above us ticked as if they were letting go of heat. Outside, a bus exhaled. When life swivels like that, the world plays along with the smallest sounds, as if it wants to witness. I didn't know, I said, because what else do you say when someone lays a bridge between your simple errand and their family's mending? You wouldn't. Why would you? But I've meant to tell you. He shifted, then met my eyes again. Your small kinness. It changed the map for me. I thought of every morning I'd spent trying to be a person who moves towards small kindnesses when the big ones feel out of reach. I thought of the days a routine protects you and the days it cages you. My cheeks warmed the way they do when the teacher calls your name and you didn't think she'd noticed your hand was up. It was nothing brave, I said, and he shook his head. It was exactly brave, he said, more gently than a correction. Then he smiled, and it had a little weary in it, the good kind that comes from work well done. I pay attention to the way people notice things. You're a noticer. There are compliments that decorate a day, and there are the ones that place a chair for you and say, "Sit, you belong here." Being called a noticer did that for me. It touched something I don't always speak, that the noticing is my way through, the way I hold on when big answers refuse to arrive. We talked in the comfortable way people do when they're not trying to sell each other anything. He told me about the workshop he runs out by the edge of town, where he restores old windows so 100-year-old houses can keep breathing. He said wood remembers every hand it's known, and if you're patient with the paint and generous with the putty, it will forgive you. I told him about the library where I used to work, about the little boy who would always ask for the book with the blue dragon, but be most interested in the red one, and how I'd learned to give him both and let him choose. We compared maps of our days, the parts that ache, the parts that sing. The light shifted. The barista flipped the little sign from lunch to afternoon treats, and the chalk squeaked. Some people carry time like a backpack, others wear it like a good coat. On this day, time felt like open hands. At one point, Mark reached for his cup and stopped, noticing mine was empty. He lifted a brow as a question. "May I get you a refill?" he asked. "If you'll let me." That "if you'll let me" threaded a permission through the room I hadn't realized I needed. There are so many ways to be careless with someone. And then there's the grace of a small question that asks for your comfort before it asks for anything else. "Yes," I said, "if you'll sit back down after." A little boldness surprised even me. He grinned like a man spotting a friendly street he didn't expect in a strange town. While he was up, I noticed the details you only see when someone steps away. The way his chair carried a pressed crescent from his wallet, the handprint he accidentally left on the table's dusty edge, the ghost of a lemon sea stuck to a napkin. There is a tenderness in the ordinary that, once you train your eyes, is impossible to unsee. He returned with my cup and set it down slowly, as if I were an elder he respected. "2 sugars," he said. "How did you know?" I laughed. "You lined 3 packets up and only tore 2, he said. "The third one's your insurance policy." I shook my head, a little embarrassed to be that readable, and a little relieved. We sipped like we had all the time of the afternoon, and maybe we did. "I've been redoing the frame on the cafe's side door," he said after a while. Jay asked me. "The wood's soft near the bottom where the snow piles up. There's also a piano back there." He glanced toward the back hallway. "It's out of tune, but it's not broken. It just needs someone to ask it to try again." I didn't know there was a piano, I said, the words rolling out like the valve on a pressure cooker. "Music has always been a room in me, even when the door's been shut for years, the light under it refuses to go out. When my marriage ended, I stopped singing because holding a note felt like telling the truth for too long. He nodded toward my throat the way a doctor might without intruding. "You hum when you write," he said. "You might not know it. You hum the way folks who used to sing hum." I touched my neck and felt the tiniest flush of being caught. "Maybe," I said. "Once upon a time." "Maybe again," he said, like a man leaving a tool where I could reach it if I wanted. There are conversations that change your posture. I sat up, not to impress him, but to meet the level place he offered. He didn't push. He didn't angle his chair closer than it should be. He didn't pretend I was someone other than a neighbor whose story he was curious about. In a world that loves a shortcut, he was building a path. "Emily," he said, and my name in his voice sounded like a familiar street on a GPS finally matching the real road. "I've been learning, awkwardly, stubbornly, that not everything needs fixing. Some things need witnessing. You strike me as someone who has witnessed a lot. I wanted to say thank you for the way you move through the world. And if you ever wanted to try that piano after closing, I could make sure the back door opens right, and nobody bothers you." He let the offer float between us, not a hook, not a test. The cafe murmured around us. A spoon in a cup, a chair leg dragging, a laugh that wasn't ours. I imagined the back room, the dust sifting in light, a piano waiting with patient strings, my own voice reluctant and hopeful as a stray dog. I felt that scared soft place I keep behind my ribs stir. "I don't know if I remember how," I said. The honesty tasted good, like rain after a dry spell. "I can wait," he said. "And the piano can too." He reached his hand across the table then, no sudden move, no assumption. He waited, actually waited, to see if I'd meet him. It wasn't romance lunging, it wasn't pity leaning in. It was a respectful bridge, 10 inches of wood and air and possibility. I looked at his hand, work-worn, and still, a nick near the knuckle, the kind of hand that holds boards true while the glue sets. I placed my hand in his, palm to palm, and he did nothing more than settle his fingers lightly around mine, as if we were resuming a conversation we'd both stepped away from years ago. "Is this okay?" he asked. "It is," I said. I meant more than the hand. I meant the pace. I meant the noticing. If you are out there listening from a porch in Ohio or a diner in Arizona, you might be smiling right now and thinking, it's just a hand. But some of us know that a steady hand across a small table can quiet an old storm better than any grand declaration. Some of us know that consent is not only for the urgent moments, it's for the gentle ones too, where trust grows because nobody is rushing it. We talked a while longer with our hands like that, not to be dramatic, only because it felt like the most honest way to tell the truth. He told me about the first window he ever saved, and how the glass was so wavy it made the outside world look slightly underwater. I told him about the music teacher who once said, "Don't aim for big, aim for clear." We counted the little rattles of the front door as people came and went. Time didn't hurry us. When the sun shifted again, and the window made a square on the floor that looked enough like a stage to be dangerous, Jay called out, "We're closing early today for a delivery, folks." Chairs creaked, coats found shoulders, the last of the pastries were tucked into paper bags. Mark let go of my hand first, not in retreat, but in care, the way you set down something you've borrowed and hope to be allowed to borrow again. He stood and cleared our cups even though there was a tub for that. He took our crumpled napkins and his patient, almost shy smile. At the door he paused, then turned back. "I'll be here tomorrow, fixing the side frame," he said. "Around 5. He didn't add, "You should come." He didn't add, "Will you sing?" He simply placed the time where I could reach for it, like a step that might help me up if I wanted it. I gathered my notebook and found that the page where I'd written my grocery list had turned into something else entirely. A few lines about winter sidewalks and tomato-red bravery, about windows that forgive, about a piano that wasn't broken so much as waiting to be asked. I slid the pen along the spiral and felt my heart do that strange new arranging again. Outside, the late light put a polish on everything. The road salt on the curb, the chalk dust on the sandwich board, the tiny tear in the cafe's awning that had never looked like anything to me until now, when it looked like proof that even shelter needs care. Mark held the door for me as if doors knew me by name. On the sidewalk, we didn't pretend we weren't thinking of the same thing. "See you," he said, and it held all the patience of a man who trusts wood and time and people more than most do. "See you," I said, hearing my old teacher's voice in my own. Clear, not big. I walked home the long way past the hardware store and the bookstore with the cat in the window, and every step felt like it rang faintly on some bell I keep hidden deep in my chest. I don't know what you call the moment you admit to yourself that you might be ready to be seen again. Maybe you call it Tuesday. Maybe you call it the hand you said yes to. Maybe you call it a piano in a back room, strings asleep, waiting for the gentle courage of a voice that is almost ready to try. If you're listening from Dallas or Detroit or a small town with one stoplight and a farm supply store, know this. Nothing grand happened in that cafe, and yet everything did. A neighbor told the truth. A woman let it land. We asked permission for the smallest things and found the big things waiting just on the other side of that care. When I reached my porch, I didn't flip on the overhead. I sat in the filtered evening and let my eyes adjust. I touched my throat again, not out of vanity, but in gratitude for a body that remembers even when the mind insists it has forgotten. Through the trees, I could see one square of the cafe's back wall. If you stared long enough, you could imagine the outline of a piano behind it, wood old enough to carry stories, strings quiet enough to listen. Tomorrow at 5 isn't a promise I owe anyone. It's an invitation I might accept. For now, I'll place it carefully on the table of my life, like a fresh cup I'm not ready to drink yet, but don't want to waste. And if you're out there in your city, your kitchen, your own favorite booth, wondering if small kindnesses matter, consider this my answer. Sometimes they fix more than a window. Sometimes they open one. Tell me your city below. Maybe I'll picture you there with me, sitting at a corner table under a stubborn ceiling fan, listening to the soft hum that slips out when a person is almost ready to sing. If tomorrow comes with a back door that opens and a piano that forgives, I'll tell you what happened next. The next day carried with it a hush of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. I woke before my alarm, the air of my bedroom still cool with dawn, and found myself listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator like it was a prologue to something. My notebook lay open on the kitchen table where I'd left it, yesterday's half-scribbled lines about windows and pianos staring back at me as if they were daring me to continue. I traced the ink with my finger, whispering the words silently, and wondered if they might feel different once I stood near that dusty upright piano Mark had spoken of. All morning, time didn't feel like a chain, but like a quiet river. I moved through the hours with unusual care, watering the plants, folding laundry, pausing at the window to notice the way light touched the leaves across the street. By late afternoon, I found myself walking toward the cafe, my heart doing that double beat it does when you're not sure whether to call what you're feeling nerves or hope. The cafe looked the same, chalkboard smudged with today's specials, the tin ceiling catching the light, but the side door was propped open. I followed the faint scent of sawdust and varnish, and there he was. Mark, crouched low, coaxing new life into the warped frame with patient strokes of a plane. His shirt sleeves were rolled, the same blue as yesterday, and his face carried that focus craftsmen wear when their hands are teaching wood to trust again. He looked up, wiping a streak of dust across his cheek, and smiled without surprise. "You came." "I did," I said, feeling the words settle in me like stones into a reverb. I wasn't sure if I would until I was already on the sidewalk. "That's the best way," he replied, standing, brushing his palms together. "If you think too long, sometimes the door closes itself." He guided me inside where the back room held that forgotten piano. It leaned in the corner under a stray shaft of golden light, its wood nicked, keys yellowed but proud, like an elder waiting for someone to sit close again. A faint draft carried the scent of coffee beans and wood polish, mingling in a way that made the space feel less like storage and more like sanctuary. Mark didn't crowd me. He stayed by the door, arms loose, giving me the wide berth of someone who understood that returning to an old love can be as fragile as stepping onto thin ice. I sat, my hands trembling a little as I pressed the first key. The note wavered, cracked, but it sang. Another followed, then another, until I found myself weaving a melody half remembered, half new. My voice surprised me. It rose quietly at first, like an apology, then steadied as the piano caught it. Mark leaned against the frame, eyes closed, listening with the kind of attention that feels like reverence. No clapping, no commentary, only listening. I had forgotten what it felt like to be heard without interruption, to let sound stretch into the room without fear. When the last note dissolved into the rafters, silence stayed with us. A soft, grateful silence. I turned, embarrassed by the tears I hadn't noticed slipping down. "You didn't forget," he said softly. "You only paused." His words touched deeper than I could explain. For so long I had measured myself by what I had abandoned, songs, dreams, small braveries. Yet here was a man who saw the pause not as a failure, but as proof I still had a choice. I laughed through the catch in my throat. It wasn't perfect. "Neither are windows when I first find them," he said, smiling gently. "But they're still worth restoring." We sat together on the worn bench in front of that piano, not holding hands this time, not needing to. The connection was already humming in the air between us, steady, mutual, patient. I realized then that what mattered wasn't the perfection of the song, but the courage to let it out in the presence of someone who honored it. As the evening deepened, Mark locked up the café, and we stepped outside into a twilight that smelled of rain and fresh earth. The street lamps glowed, the town slowed, and my chest carried a looseness I hadn't known in years. "Emily," he said as we walked, "thank you for trusting me with that." "Thank you," I replied, my voice steadier now, for reminding me I hadn't lost it. We parted at the corner, his house one way, mine the other. He didn't ask for more, didn't promise more. Instead, he gave me something far rarer, the space to breathe, to rediscover, to decide what tomorrow might hold. When I reached home, I left the lights off and stood by the window, listening to the faint echo of my own song still vibrating somewhere inside me. For the first time in a long while, I believed that the pauses in life weren't endings at all. They were invitations waiting for us to notice. So if you're listening now from a porch in Kansas, a kitchen in Florida, or a quiet den in Oregon, hear this. It's never too late to step into a room you once loved, never too late to press a key, open your mouth, and let the song begin again. All it takes is a neighbor's kind words, a steady hand, and your own willingness to believe that even after long silence, music waits patiently for you to return. And as I closed the curtains, I whispered to myself what I'll whisper to you. Tomorrow is never too late to begin again.